If you've driven through the Peatt/Sunderland corridor lately, you've probably noticed that things don't look great. Open excavation pits, demolished homes left as rubble piles, and hazard notices going out to residents. It's not a good look, and understandably, people are frustrated and concerned. But there's a bigger story here that's worth understanding, because it involves multiple failed developments, real geotechnical safety risks, a web of connected companies, and a current council that's taken a markedly different approach to holding developers accountable. I wanted to put it all in one place so people can see the full picture. The scene, 2748 Peatt Road/2745 Scaife Road. This is the one making headlines right now. The scene was approved as an 18 and 24-story high-rise complex by Evantra and Jagpal Developments, rezoned in January 2022. Mayor Stu Young personally cut the ribbon in spring 2022, calling it the project that would make Langford a modern city. Times Colonist, May 2022. The site was excavated under permit in early 2023, shoring walls were installed, and then basically nothing happened. A foundation permit was issued in April 2025, some minor footings were poured in October 2025, and the site has sat as a massive open pit ever since. In September 2025, an email from the scene team to buyers claimed they were in full-scale construction, a claim that bore no resemblance to reality. Goldstream Gazette, January 2026. The city retained WSP Canada Incorporated, an independent engineering firm, to conduct a peer review of the geotechnical conditions at the site. What they found is serious. There is a risk of sloughing, partial collapse, along the southern retaining wall of the excavation. That wall sits right up against a neighboring strata property. WSP's recommendation was that heavy vehicles, garbage trucks, moving trucks, delivery vehicles, even emergency vehicles, should not use the adjacent strata road until the situation is resolved. Check News, February 12, 2026. Think about that for a second. Residents in that strata can't safely have a fire truck access their road because a developer dug a hole and walked away from it. Mayor Goodmanson and city staff personally delivered warning letters to all 17 surrounding property owners. The mayor was direct at the press conference. This situation did not happen overnight, and it did not happen by accident. He called out the property owners, White Rock-based Jagpal Development, by name, saying they had effectively abandoned the site, and that Langford residents should never be the ones left holding the risk while developers speculate on land and walk away from their responsibilities. Times Colonist, February 13, 2026. Council held a special meeting and moved to issue a remedial action order. Evantra has until February 25 at noon to begin the necessary corrective work. If they don't, the city steps in, does the work and bills the developer. A town hall for affected residents is scheduled for February 28 so people can speak directly to the situation. Victoria Buzz, February 13, 2026. That's accountability with a deadline. Langford Gateway, Arncote Avenue/Peatt Road/Sunderland Road. This one has been a slow-motion disaster that predates the current council. Langford Gateway Developments, backed by Vancouver-based Centerra Group, announced plans in 2021 for 22 and 18-story towers with 269 residential units on a land assembly at Arncote, Peatt, and Sunderland. Then Mayor Stu Young praised the project as bringing affordable home ownership and density and vitality to one of Canada's fastest-growing cities. Times Colonist, February 2025. The project never got off the ground. The developer defaulted on an $8.2 million mortgage. Lanyard Investment Incorporated filed foreclosure proceedings in BC Supreme Court, and the court granted a conduct of sale order effective January 2025. The roughly 1.8-acre land assembly, assessed at $11.5 million, is now being marketed for sale through CBRE. Goldstream Gazette, February 2025. But here's where it gets worse. In February 2024, the developer demolished a vacant house on the 840 Arncote Avenue site and just left it. Piles of wood, metal, bricks, and waste sat exposed for months. An environmental assessment confirmed significant accumulations of contaminated and combustible demolition waste, including asbestos and lead paints. Neighbors described living next to it as unbearable. They couldn't use their own yards, rodent activity spiked, and illegal dumping piled on top of the existing mess. Greater Victoria News, December 2024. The city's bylaw team issued 25 fines totaling $10,500 since July 2024. Only the first 3 were paid. After that, radio silence from the developer. So the city escalated. Council declared the site a nuisance and hazard, imposed remedial action requirements, and made clear that if the developer didn't act, the city would do the cleanup and bill it back, with unpaid costs becoming property tax arrears. Greater Victoria News, December 2024. 25 fines, a formal hazard declaration, and a remedial action order. That's the city exhausting every tool in the community charter to protect residents when a developer abandons their responsibilities. Danbrook 1/Ridgeview Place, 2766 Claude Road. This is the longer-running situation that many residents already know about, and the one that most clearly illustrates what happens when oversight fails at the permitting stage. The 11-story Danbrook 1 tower was built by Langford-based DB Services and designed by Sorensen Trilogy Engineering. According to court filings, when Langford reviewed the building permit application in late 2017, city staff identified missing details and other omissions in the plans submitted by DB Services. However, they failed to catch the structural code compliance issues in the drawings. A building permit was issued in January 2018, conditional upon receipt and approval of the missing information. DB Services never submitted that additional information, and construction went ahead anyway. An occupancy permit was granted soon after without the city taking any steps to verify if any of the identified issues had been addressed. Vancouver Island Free Daily, November 2025. The building was substantially complete by March 2018 and started moving residents in by March 2019. But by then, structural engineer Leon Peatt of RJC Engineers had already filed a formal complaint with Engineers and Geoscientists BC, EGBC, about the building's seismic and structural integrity, and also raised concerns that the project drawings may have been copied from an RJC project. EGBC notified the city of Langford of the complaint in April 2019. Capital Daily, December 2021. Here's where it gets deeply troubling. In August 2019, Toronto-based Centurion Apartment Properties purchased the building. Before the purchase, Centurion contacted the city for assurance. In late June 2019, Langford issued a comfort letter to Centurion confirming the building's compliance, despite having been informed 2 months earlier by EGBC about the active investigation into the building's structural engineer. Centurion says this deprived them of the opportunity to investigate the building's condition before buying it. Times Colonist, July 2021, November 2025. The building was evacuated just before Christmas 2019, when Langford revoked the occupancy permit after an engineering report confirmed serious safety concerns. 86 of 90 units were occupied. The city spent $300,000 in emergency funds to temporarily house displaced tenants. Times Colonist, March 2022. Centurion then spent millions on remediation work designed by Sorensen Trilogy Engineer and Contran, and reviewed by Glotman Simpson. The building was reoccupied as Ridgeview Place. Then in April 2023, EGBC told Centurion it had serious concerns that the remediation design was incomplete and deficient. The building was evacuated a second time. It has sat empty since. Times Colonist, November 2025. It's worth noting that the city's chief building inspector at the time, Jerry Warbeck, had a prior track record. A 2016 BC Supreme Court decision declared his permit issuance for a different Langford residential complex unreasonable and not in compliance with the Architects Act. Vancouver Island Free Daily, November 2025. DB Services subsequently filed for bankruptcy. They had completed 12 projects in Langford's downtown core. Ashcroft Cache Creek Journal, August 2023. Centurion has filed an amended civil claim in BC Supreme Court naming more than a dozen defendants including DB Services, Loco Investments, Sorensen Trilogy, Glotman Simpson, and the City of Langford. None of the allegations have been proven in court. The Connected Web, who are these companies? This is where it's important to understand that these aren't 3 isolated failures. There are direct connections between the players. Evantra Developments was the common thread. Matthew Moradian, VP of Evantra Development Corporation, served as the development and marketing arm for both the Scene, Jagpal's project, and Langford Gateway, Centerra's project. Community feedback for both projects was directed through the same Puni Group email address. Greater Victoria News, September 2021, Saanich News, September 2021. So when we talk about these as separate failures, understand that the same development management company was steering both. Jagpal Development is a White Rock-based family company headed by Navi Jagpal. They aren't just failing on the scene, they're also behind Dunford Crossing at Dunford Avenue and Jacqueline Road, rezoned in early 2022 for 25 and 29-story towers that were supposed to be the West Shore's tallest buildings. That project has also stalled. The remaining homes on the site, 9 vacant and dilapidated buildings, were declared a nuisance by the city in October 2025 following complaints about trespassing, graffiti, dumping, and general unsightliness. Residents had been complaining since November 2023. Despite repeated inspections, multiple warnings, compliance orders, bylaw penalties and enforcement actions, the property owner failed to reliably manage the site. Jagpal was given 60 days to address the issues or face city intervention including demolition at their expense. Victoria News, February 2026, Sook News Mirror, October 2025. So that's one developer, Jagpal, with 2 massive stalled projects, both rezoned in the final months of the Stu Young Council.